and welcome to Watching Washington.
Why did you start C-SPAN?
Always wanted to be in this business, always.
If you had one piece of advice to give, what would you say?
Well, that's a great question.
Gun violence, abortion, inflation, voting laws, we can go on and on.
What do you think is most important to young voters?
That's such an excellent question, and I think that's the key issue.
Both sides want the power.
Today, parties are very different.
Good afternoon and welcome back to a new semester of Watching Washington. It's Friday, February 3rd, and I'm Jaden Rusi.
And I'm Marco Lunetta, and it's been an interesting start to the new year, and the biggest story facing Washington right now is the debt ceiling. Despite bipartisan divide and uncompromising rhetoric to the press before the meeting, President Joe Biden and Speaker of the House Kevin McCarthy appeared to have a productive conversation on the debt ceiling. According to CNN, McCarthy is hopeful following his conversation with President Joe Biden, believing a deal will be brokered well before the Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen's extraordinary measures run out in June. Although no official deal has been made, negotiations seem to have hit their stride as the GOP aims for greater spending cuts before raising the debt ceiling. After hitting the debt ceiling in January, it will be imperative that the Democrats and Republicans find and broker a resolution to avoid potentially catastrophic default.
The President and I had a good first meeting. I shared my perspective with him. He shared his, and we agreed to continue the conversation. We want to make sure we do this in a responsible, reasonable way, and we'll be talking again.
The White House announced this week that they will be ending the national COVID-19 emergency as well as the public health emergency. After a 2-year-long pandemic, the national emergencies will come to an end on May 11th of 2023. According to NPR, the plan to end both of these declarations gradually is an attempt to prevent wide-ranging chaos and uncertainty in the healthcare system. In addition, the ending of these declarations could have effects on the funding of COVID testing and vaccines, as well as other pandemic-related policies. The House Oversight Committee launched an investigation into federal pandemic spending this week. More than 1,000 people have been convicted on federal charges of defrauding COVID relief programs, according to NBC. According to the Wednesday hearing, one of the largest crimes involved a $250 million fraud scheme by a transnational criminal group. The COVID fraud scenario raises questions about the security of government funding distribution.
South Africa will be hosting Russia and China for a joint naval exercise which has the U.S. concerned. Last week, South Africa announced that they will be hosting a military operation that will start on the 1-year anniversary of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The operation, which is called Exercise Mosey 2, will be from February 17th to the 27th off South Africa's Indian Ocean coast, which will help share operational skills and knowledge between the three countries. South African Foreign Defense Minister Ndeli Pandor said this operation will be an exercise with friends. All three countries are part of the BRICS mechanism, which is a partnership of 5 of the world's fastest growing economies. The other 2 countries that are part of this group are India and Brazil. While they are not a military alliance like NATO, the countries have been talking about doing a naval exercise for years. In fact, a similar exercise took place back in October of 2019 between the 3 countries in Cape Town. David Feldman, a spokesperson for the U.S. Embassy in South Africa, said that we are concerned about South Africa's plan to hold a joint naval exercises with Russia and the PRC in February, even as Moscow continues its brutal and unlawful war of aggression against Ukraine. Second Gentleman Emhoff visited Auschwitz this International Holocaust Remembrance Day, in the wake of anti-Semitism movements around the world. Global government officials gathered in remembrance of the thousands of lives lost at Auschwitz, among them being Emhoff Harris, the first Jewish spouse of a U.S. president or vice president. Emhoff shed some tears as he laid a wreath and sash from the American people against a wall at Auschwitz, where countless prisoners were executed by the SS. The trip also included a ceremony with Holocaust survivors commemorating the 78th anniversary of the liberation of the concentration camp. The Biden administration attributes the recent rise in anti-Semitism to high-profile influencers on social media spreading hurtful opinions, and has recently launched a task force through more than 20 federal agencies dedicated to fighting the hatred.
California Representative Jimmy Gomez has launched the Congressional Dads Caucus a few weeks after a new House Speaker was elected. Gomez gained media traction during the vote for House Speaker not because of his vote, but because of what he was wearing, his son Hajj. Representatives have previously brought children to the House to witness historical events unfold. However, this caucus goes beyond the acceptance of children in the workplace. Gomez says his goal is to bring visibility to the role of working dads across the country. We want to show not just interest, but advocacy on the issues that impact working parents, Gomez said. Since studies show that women typically uphold most of the parental responsibilities in the household, Gomez said it's time for dads to do their part in advancing policies that will make a difference in the lives of parents across the country.
According to the Associated Press, the United States Department of Commerce has blocked license renewals to U.S. companies that send crucial tech components to Huawei. Cutting off these companies from Huawei has prompted a swift response from the Chinese government, accusing the U.S. of aiming for total tech hegemony. These license blockages come after the U.S. has cited multiple security concerns against Huawei, who the U.S. believes could be a puppet of Chinese spying efforts. As tensions rise between the U.S. and China over tech manufacturing and Taiwan, the U.S. continues to take greater action against Chinese influence in the U.S.
Following President Joe Biden's announcement on Wednesday, 31 modern U.S. tanks will be sent to Kyiv's military. It prompted Germany reluctantly agree to send its own tanks, which might spark similar actions throughout Europe. This turning point confirms Washington's belief that Western solidarity against Putin is decisive for the victory of Ukraine. According to CNN, Ukraine will now be under pressure to prove its ability to utilize these new tanks in planned combined military operations. Still, the diplomatic and military cascade that Biden's willingness to send the tanks opened delivered Moscow a crucial message.
The Colorado River is one of the largest rivers in the U.S. and acts as an essential water source for 7 western states. Due to overuse and major droughts in the region, the river's water levels have dwindled significantly in recent years. In an effort to reduce the use of the Colorado River water, the 7 states have been tasked with banding together to devise a conservation plan. According to CNBC, this plan was supposed to be finalized on January 31st of 2023, but has been pushed off for a second time by California. If the plan cannot be agreed upon by all of the 7 states supported by the river, it may soon fall to the federal government to make water cuts.
The recent release of video footage of the Tyree Nichols police beating in Memphis has resurrected calls for Congress to consider some police reform. According to NPR, 5 officers have been charged of second-degree murder, aggravated assault, aggravated kidnapping, official misconduct, and official oppression. Passing police reform legislation has been a struggle for both parties in the past. Representative Tim Scott said it is Congress's duty to put aside party differences and intervene. Congressional Black Caucus Chair Stephen Horsford has plans to meet with President Biden about police reform. However, a date has not yet been set.
Recently, a variety of bills were proposed in Washington surrounding lawmaker stock trading. Democratic Representative Angie Craig reintroduced the Humble Act, which would prohibit members of Congress from owning or trading stocks while in office. Another bill, the Trust in Congress Act, would require members of Congress and their families to put certain invested assets into a blind trust while in office. The bipartisan act is led by Democratic Representative Abigail Spanberger and Republican Representative Chip Roy. A third bill of similar nature was introduced by Republican Senator Josh Whaley. The Preventing Elected Leaders from Owning Securities and Investments, or PLOSI Act, would also prohibit lawmakers from trading and owning stocks while they are in office. Each of these bills seek to prevent Congress members from insider trading or trading with knowledge that isn't available to the public.
As of yesterday, the CEO of TikTok, Xiaozi Xu, will stand before Congress amid concerns for national security, as well as the mental health of young individuals. Xu will stand before the House of Representatives Energy and Commerce Committee on March 23rd. In a statement from the House committee, they claim that the app is linked to the Communist Party. They also stated that Americans have the right to know how the app has and will impact their privacy, as well as now the app may affect behavior in relation to mental health. Previously, under the Trump administration, the former president tried to order a nationwide ban on the app, which was unsuccessful. In contrast, just last month, President Biden approved a ban of the app on all devices held by federal employees.
Former UN Ambassador Nikki Haley is expected to announce a bid for the presidency this month. She will be the second major candidate to announce her candidacy following former President Donald Trump. According to Politico, Haley will announce her entry into the 2024 presidential race in Charleston, South Carolina on February 15th. Haley is a former Republican governor of that state.
The FBI searched President Biden's Rehoboth Beach house this Wednesday in light of the classified document probe. No documents considered classified were found in this week's search. However, some materials and handwritten notes that relate to Biden's time as vice president were taken for further review. According to NPR, Biden's personal lawyer, Bob Bauer, says it was a planned search and the FBI had Biden's full support and cooperation. Just a few weeks prior, federal agents searched Biden's Wilmington home in which a small number of classified documents were discovered. Biden is alongside Donald Trump and Mike Pence, having had raids of their personal residencies in search of these documents. It was discovered that former President Trump had over 300 classified documents in possession at his Mar-a-Lago residence in August. There will be more updates to come as the classified document probe continues. Today's guest is going to explain why these mishandled documents are something that the government doesn't treat lightly.
Former CIA analyst Melissa Will joins reporter John Waterworth here on Watching Washington.
Thank you. That's right. I've got Professor Melissa Will with me here today to discuss the topic of classified documents. Thanks for taking the time to be here.
I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, my first question for you today is what exactly categorizes a classified document?
Sure. Okay. So the classification system is a process that the federal government uses to manage access to information whose public exposure could damage national security. So presidents have established and developed a classification system with a series of executive orders, beginning around World War II, and they're sort of regularly updated. So we have 3 levels of classification within the system. We have confidential, secret, top secret. So the idea basically is a top secret document applies to information whose unauthorized disclosure could cause exceptionally grave damage to the national security that an original classification authority is able to identify or describe. Secret is for serious damage, confidential is mere damage. So access to particularly sensitive information can be restricted even further. And so you can have, it can be designated as sensitive compartmented information, or SCI. So, the Obama administration, as sort of a fun add-on, created a category called controlled unclassified information to handle sort of sensitive information that isn't classified. So, okay, well, some information, identification of spies, how certain information was collected, military technology, clearly meets these standards, but a lot of it's really subjective. And so that sort of leads us to this really important question, well, who makes this judgment? You know, who classifies our documents? So all of this is laid out in those executive orders that I just mentioned, but quickly, the president, and in the performance of their executive duties, the vice president, the agencies and officials designated by the president, so it's sort of the head of the CIA, head of the NSA, and then United States government officials delegated this authority by the heads of agencies. Let me say that an easier way. Usually it's our collectors, the people who get the information, and our analysts, which is what I was, the people who make the assessments. So if materials are classified, access is limited. Only those officials with a security clearance and a need to know are permitted to see them. Long answer to your question.
Gotcha. Thank you. So you said something about World War II, and that is when classified documents began to exist.
We were always, protecting them, but that's when we sort of set up the framework to be more systematic in our protection of our secrets.
Gotcha. And so our classified document breaches, are they a common occurrence?
There's not a lot of data on how common this is, right? You would expect it would be fairly secret. I would guess, however, that most breaches are intentional, such as those perpetrated by Edward Snowden or Chelsea Manning. However, accidents can happen. In general, what we see is the higher the classification on a document, the tighter the controls. So the less likely that you're going to get an accidental breach. However, presidents, vice presidents, members of the National Security Council, they're using these documents. And so they live in a slightly different world than us. They can move these classified records around their offices. I think in case of the president and the vice president, they can move them to their residences in ways that, of course, ordinary mortals could never do. So I would say accidents could happen, particularly with those lesser controlled documents. They might kind of get in the wrong file or just be accidentally put in a pile that gets moved into the wrong place. All of this is made more difficult, right? Both the sort of preventing those breaches, but also preventing those accidents by the fact that we're just producing a massive number of classified documents today. And so it's really difficult, especially at those lower classification levels, for all those controls to be in place.
Gotcha. So obviously, classified documents are a very big deal.
Yes.
Why is it so important to keep them where they're supposed to be?
Right. So on one hand, we want our policymakers using this information, right? So we want to make sure that people who need to know can access the documents. On the other hand, it's really important to keep them safe because we have to collect our collection sources, where we're getting this information, in our methods. If these are released, right, then the entities that we're collecting against can take countermeasures. It might also be the case that sort of the information that comes out, whether it's sort of the collection or the analysis, might be embarrassing or sort of lead to conflicts in terms of our relationships with others. So again, I would say the main key point there is the protecting our sources and our methods. Something that's really interesting that is there are rules for the life cycle of a document, right? That's classified, sort of how it's stored, how it's transported, how it's disseminated, how it's declassified, and how it's destroyed. So the Presidential Records Act of 1978, that dictates what the former or what former vice presidents or presidents can take home with them after serving in office. It used to be the case that they could bring everything. And the idea was that they needed to write their memoir, so they wanted all their documents with them. And so now, as I mentioned before, the National Archive is in charge of gathering and storing everything, including these classified documents, as the president leads office and as the vice president leads office. And so the National Archive actually has the infrastructure to sort of store and then eventually declassify as appropriate. And then that material can make its way into the presidential libraries.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Well, I think that just about wraps it up for us today. That's all we've got for you this week on Watching Washington. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next week.